All right. I believe we are recording here. So, welcome to the Crossplane community meeting for this week. I am Daniel Mangum. I'm going to be running the meeting this week while Jared is out of town. So, thank you for joining. We're going to do our normal kind of checkup of our next milestone for release. And then we have a lot of PRs here to talk about. It doesn't look like all the authors are currently on this call, so there may be some that we can skip over, and I'm going to let Daniel Suskin, run that part of the meeting. But we'll start off with kind of a quick checkup on 0.6. All right, so if you're not familiar with how we do our planning, we have this roadmap document in the main Crossplane repo where we keep track of our goals for different releases and link to them as well. So our upcoming release, which we have defined here as targeting next Wednesday, so a week from tomorrow, is going to be 0.6. And these are a couple things that we're focusing on for that. I think this could use some refinement here, but essentially the main ideas of what we're moving towards are making a better stack UX experience. So essentially making it so that stacks can be provisioned without having to write code, and you're able to kind of customize the way that you define claims and classes and that sort of thing. So we have a lot of work on that, which we'll get to in the PRs. And then the other thing is V1 Beta 1 service APIs. So primarily for this release, we're focusing on getting the GKE V1 Beta 1 done. So we've previously focused on database and caches for V1 Beta 1 API quality, but Kubernetes clusters are a little bit more complicated, I guess you would say. In terms of what V1 Beta 1 looks like, how you define masters and nodes and that sort of thing. So we'll take a look at that as well. But yeah, so be looking for that release coming out next week. And we're going to aim, I think, for a feature freeze this Friday. So any of this stuff that needs to get in, be aware of that if you want that in the 0.6 milestone. Daniel, are you ready to walk through some of this PRs we have here?
Yep.
Cool. Do you want to take control of the screen here?
Sure.
Awesome.
Actually, need to open up that document as well.
I'll drop a link to this in the chat so that anyone who's on can access it.
Okay, so the first, I added a few of the PRs here, the first 4 or so. And for these ones, I just wanted to call attention to them as probably needing help since they've all been open for more than 3 weeks at this point. So the first one looks like it's stacks version design. I'm just gonna pop these up on the screen, and then I think since the authors aren't here, we won't talk about them very long. So first one, the stacks version design. Okay, been open since early October. Opened by Luke.
If anyone has context on any of these that you are specifically aware of why these have been open for this period of time, even though the authors aren't here, please feel free to offer that. Or if you just have any context on what they're about, that's useful as well.
Sweet. The second one is cluster scoped cluster stack installs, open since early November. Marcus has got this one open. I believe this one and the next one are, yeah, they're related to some of the permissions work and thinking that's been going on. That's about all the context that I have for them, though. Next one, also Marcus, 27 days ago. Use a cluster role for namespace stack deployments. Sounds similar. And then the last one that I added for time open purposes, it's the workaround for Helm 3 compatibility, which is being worked on by Hassan. So I did see that for this one, I believe Jared was asking whether it still needed to be open, but I'm not sure what the response was. Looks like Moafik also recently reviewed this as well. Anyway, those are the ones that I added for time open. We'll have to connect with the authors again to follow up with those. So it looks like the next one is the GKE V1 Beta 1, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to open that one up, I'll give a little bit of context on this. So as you see, I've kind of been working on this one with a PR open and trying to document design decisions I'm making, because with GKE clusters, there is kind of an interesting situation where to create a node pool for the GK cluster, the cluster has to already exist, although you cannot create a cluster with no node pools. And per our kind of like API design, which Moafik has done a lot of work on, we don't like to have kind of like side effect or inline provisioning of resources that are also managed with Crossplane. So we want to model node pools as a Crossplane resource themselves. So the issue that this will actually fix also specifies V1 Beta 1 GK node pools, and the API types are defined in this PR. We'll decide if we want to implement them at the same exact time or not. You'll also see that 2 of those bullet points are related to supporting both V1 Alpha 3 and V1 Beta 1 of GKE cluster. So right now, essentially, you can only create a GKE cluster with the default node pool. And that's essentially created inline, and node pools are not a resource modeled by Crossplane as a custom resource. And it was our initial thought that we'd like to keep support for that for the time being while we're supporting this new version, which requires creation of the GKE cluster and the node pools. However, it really doesn't work super well with conversion functions, since we're creating kind of like one resource to two when you do conversion functions with custom resources in Crossplane. I mean, in Kubernetes, you essentially have to preserve all information. So what that means is that there'd have to be fields that kind of kept the inline node pools from V1 Alpha 3 and created actual node pool resources, since it's dividing into 2. So basically what that means is it's very, very difficult to support both of these. And it would probably be easier with like a feature flag or feature branch type thing, which I'm not sure we want to do. So I will probably be pushing for just moving on to V1 Beta 1 there. But I have some open questions there with answers as I've kind of encountered them, as well as comments below where I've reviewed the code myself and am kind of like pointing out some of the places where I've made kind of like subjective decisions and that sort of thing. And so I'd love any input or feedback there from anyone, especially if you have a particular use case for GKE clusters. We want to make sure that you see this as a way that your use case can be supported. So please feel free to give any feedback on that.
Sweet. Okay, looks like the next one is controller runtime V0.4. Moafik?
Yeah, actually nothing much to talk about. We are bumping the controller runtime dependency to 0.4 because there's a breaking change in client Go, and like newly created stacks are not able to import Crossplane runtime due to that. So we need to bump it, and I just opened this PR and the corresponding PRs in other repositories.
Yeah, I just added that one because it's something that I'd like to go and get pushed through because of that breaking change. I don't know if anyone else has tried. Well, I know Muvafik, you have tried to add like a bunch of different Kates.io dependencies. And we're currently, the version of controller runtime we're using is on Kubernetes 1.14, I believe. And there's an issue within the 1.14 releases of Client Go where it is not compatible with all the other 1.14 Kates.io vendor dependencies. So I would be very excited about getting these merged and bumping to the newer version of controller runtime.
Cool. And does the order or care that we take merging these matter since we have a bunch of them?
Yeah, so basically this PR is the main one, and it does only the bumping. But in the other ones like Crossplane and Stack repositories, we have the replace statements that uses this commit of the PR.
Yeah.
So basically, when we merge this, we need to update the other ones to, update the controller runtime that they depend on.
Cool.
Much like a bubble up process.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Okay. So
One other thing, Daniel, that after we get through these, I want to circle back to is I realized that we talked about the patch release for Crossplane last time, but it hadn't been implemented yet. So I'm adding a little topic on that because it's been merged and released.
Cool. Okay. So the next pull request is the resource claim definition design sketch. Did you add this one as well, Dan?
Yeah, so this is a fairly new pull request. Nick just opened this on Sunday night, I believe. And Daniel, I think you actually gave this a review, it looks like. But this is basically allowing users or stack owners to more easily define their own resource claims. So this is a pretty big improvement in my opinion. This is the design for it. So I think there'll be a fair amount of discussion here. It's probably useful to have Nick talk about it more in depth, but I definitely wanted to surface it here so that people are aware that this was open since it was on a weekend night.
Cool. Yeah. And one other thing I'll call out here is that when I was reviewing this, I decided to try out our pattern that we had been talking about of marking people as assignees when action is requested. So that's why Phil, Nick, and Bassam have been marked as assignees on this one. Initially, I had myself, and then when I finished the review, I unassigned myself and added Nick.
Cool.
Cool. Next is multiple secret propagation.
Yeah, so this is another one that I have here. Essentially what this does is, for context, EKS on AWS, the connection secret for a cluster that you provision actually gets updated over time. I think Muvafik knows the actual, like how often it is. I think it's like every hour or something like that. So it's frequent enough. So when you provision a managed resource and it's claimed, the connection secret is propagated to the namespace of the claim. So if that happens just once, then quickly your connection information is going to get out of date for something like an EKS cluster. So what we have, and Nick implemented this maybe a few weeks ago, is a secret reconciler, which basically uses annotations to propagate a secret continuously. So you can think of it as watching two different secrets. One of them is kind of the managed resource secret, and one of them is the claim secret. And when the managed resource updates its connection secret, that gets propagated to the namespace secret, or the claim secret, excuse me, they're both namespaced. So that's really great. But right now we just have the ability for one managed resource secret to be propagated to one claim secret, which makes sense in our model right now. The kind of impetus for this, which I think it's linked right there, in Crossplane 11.01 is for our new Kubernetes target design, which basically allows us to schedule Kubernetes applications in multiple namespaces to the same Kubernetes cluster. So in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to propagate the managed resource secret to multiple kind of claim connection secrets. They're not actually claimed explicitly, but essentially just have the ability in the secret reconciler to propagate one kind of managed resource secret to multiple different users of it. So this PR adds the ability for the secrets to be propagated to multiple kind of like namespaces that are using them. So that enables the design in the consuming K8s clusters PR there.
Cool. So do we typically, like for these ones that we want to surface, are we just, is spreading awareness enough, or are we wanting to like assign an action item or a person to follow up on them?
Yeah, so this one is probably I've just been doing the reviewers. So if you want us to move to that assigning process, I'd be happy to assign. I mean, this is probably going to be just something Nick. I think he's reviewed it once already, but reviews and approves and that sort of thing. So we could assign him if you wanted to. He's aware of this, but yeah.
Cool.
Just for my own personal context, is the assigning, how does the assigning differ from the reviewers? Is that just more for like from a ZenHub perspective?
It's so that if there are multiple like rounds of feedback, it's easier to tell whose court the ball is in.
Okay, cool.
Because if Nick left feedback and then wanted feedback from you, then he could assign you again.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're still experimenting, so if you think it's not useful, that's good feedback too.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I'm always happy to make our review process as efficient as possible. So I appreciate you looking into that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Next one is going to be remote CRDs for integration tests, which is you again, Dan.
Cool. So this is something that's been open for a while again. If you remember in a meeting a few weeks back, we had the initial PR, which basically added the library to Crossplane Runtime to allow us to do integration tests on actual live clusters and that sort of thing. So what this does is all of the stacks, when they implement integration tests, a lot of them to test things like dynamic provisioning or even just to register the controllers to run, need to also have the core Crossplane CRDs installed in there. So that would be like Kubernetes application and then all the different claim types. One way to do that would be to actually, copy those CRDs into the repo where the integration tests are defined. But that's not really a super great thing to do, to have these CRDs that are basically defined somewhere else and you have to continuously copy over into a version control system. So what we want to be able to do, and also make this more extensible for other stacks and that sort of thing, is for you to be able to define a remote location for where a directory of CRDs may be. So with this update, it basically will download the CRDs, install them into the cluster, and then clean them up after an integration test run. And it's been demonstrated in that linked one on StatGCP. So the integration tests have been something that haven't really been made a priority, but more of just like, this is something we want long-term. And so I'd love to be able to push these forward, because I think that our iteration speed on developing is going to be greatly enhanced by integration tests. And they seem to kind of keep hitting blockers or just being like worked on the side and that sort of thing. So this is just kind of a plug for those.
Awesome. Yeah, integration tests are great.
Agreed.
So if for this one, it looks like you applied to Nick, so he would be the assignee for this one.
Yeah, that's right. And he's been not feeling well lately, so that's why some of these are like that.
Yeah. Is it the same for this one as well?
Yeah, that one is still in draft right now just because it's reliant on the update on
Okay,
Crossplane runtime. So we can probably leave that one unassigned for the moment.
cool. Sounds good. Okay. Cool. So next one looks like resource packs. Yeah, got
Yeah.
2 links here.
So this is the PR to the one pager. So like the easy stacks is the initial name, but I guess we are starting to call them resource packs, where you just dump your resource classes, network resources and stuff in a folder where you define its customization definitions. And then we've got a generic reconciler that you just import in your stack and just let it run. The one page is a bit long, but I guess I can give you a link to open and like see how easy or hard it is to develop a resource pack.
There's another.
So I copied a link to the chat, Zoom chat. Okay, so this is the minimal GCP resource pack where you have like everything one node and like in the same network and stuff. So if you want to develop something like that, what you have to do is just basically map the variant references from your CR to the names that you use in the customization YAMLs, and you are pretty much up and running. So basically, it's not no Go code, but like minimal Go code, I would say. It's also possible, like if you don't take any parameters in your CR, you could just go with you can just do it without any Go code if you are happy with your customization folder as it is.
Cool. Okay. And was this link originally in the one pager or?
No, so this is the one pager, and the link that I just copied is like an implementation of minimal GCP from a PR. So basically, we will have one new repository for generic reconciler and 3 new repositories for like GCP, AWS, and Azure stacks for like minimal stacks, that I would say.
So it's from this one?
Yeah, so this is, yeah.
Oh, should I open this generic reconciler as well then?
Yeah, you can just go to the file if you want. So if you go to files, change it, there should be a resource pack reconciler.go. Yeah, there it is, this one. Oh, it's configuration stack, so the name is still old. So it's basically like you have, like as a developer, you have 2 places to inject your custom logic. One is, this reconciler creates an overlay customization file, and you can supply your own functions where you edit that customization object. Like you can add a new name prefixer or, some other logic and stuff. So you see here, there are like defaults, the name prefixer, label propagator, and like only reference adder. So the one place is basically you inject your custom function into the inject your functions to edit the customization object and let the controller render everything. And then you've got the child resource patcher, and at that step, you get an array of resources that are rendered. Like it could be like 100 different YAML resources. And at that step, you can inject your custom logic to operate on the Kubernetes object itself, like not customize, but like objects in themselves before the deployment. And then after that, it just applies all the resources. That is like the reconciliation, which is pretty simple actually. It just runs customize, and then runs the patches, and then applies each generated resource.
Hey, Muvafak, is any of this specific to GCP, or is this a generic controller that can apply customize
Yeah,
variants?
that is completely generic. In fact, even minimal GCP does not import stack GCP.
Yeah.
It just shows like it just says, hey, spec.region of my stack CR should go to that variable in the customization.
Doesn't this seems super similar to what a template controller would do?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you guys talked about, Suskin and Muvafak talked about this one?
Not about this one specifically, but we've talked about how the work for this project is probably going to be reusable for a template controller.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like one, it's really cool, and two, it's very much what I would have thought a template controller would do.
Yeah, I guess the main difference would be here. You are like in most of the cases required to write some Go code. It's not like really declarative completely. Like you are able to inject some Go code in a few places, but like as opposed to template stacks where you, as far as I know, like you mostly give YAMLs declaratively, like define your operator.
Yeah, but this seems like 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, from the user's perspective, it's different, but this code has to run somewhere still.
understood, and that could be a generic template controller code. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So my high level question is, why would we do this intermediate step if we're doing template controller?
So my opinion on this is actually basically like a lot of stuff that we're doing right now somehow overlaps with the template controller. But like, it's not complete overlap. And like, like for example, in this case, our goal is like specifically for like resource classes and like configurations.
Yeah.
Whereas template controller is like, do whatever you want. So here we are like more, like we are more optimizing for that case. But like in the end, like after template controllers arrive, we could just do the same thing with them. But like when you're more, aiming for specific things and like,
Yeah.
do the opinionated stuff, it's just faster to move.
Yeah. The flip side of this is that we're now seeing probably 3 or 4 places that we could have used a template controller. I mean, we're having this discussion about resource packs. We're having a discussion about composing. We're having a discussion about claim definitions, and maybe other stuff too. I'm forgetting now. But there's a common theme across all of them, which is we need a building block called, template controller. So, I guess I'm wondering if, recognizing the base pattern, even if having a naive initial implementation, but recognizing that this is the same pattern everywhere, would help us kind of converge quickly.
Yeah.
So versus do 3 or 4 implementations and then have to, no pun intended, reconcile them. So anyway, worth more thought, but it's nice to see a version of a template controller in the context of resource packs or easy stacks.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Muvafak, it sounds like maybe we should chat a bit more and see if we can converge earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Looks like that was the last PR. Do you mind if I go ahead and go through the patch release real quick, Daniel?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Cool.
That was all you had, right, Mavavic?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, like I said, this was talked about last community meeting, I believe, but the patch release actually happened. So I just wanted to point out exactly what the change was again. So last community meeting, you'll see that we had the stacks have a patch release, and this was related to custom resources essentially getting cleaned up inadvertently through garbage collection. So that fixed it in relation to the individual stacks, but we still needed to fix it with the actual stack manager. So the issue here that was being experienced, which you can read about in the linked release here, is that cluster stack installs are namespaced, but CRDs are cluster scoped. So there was a basically invalid relationship between them, and that we had a namespace resource having owner references on a cluster scoped resource, which is kind of like a cross namespace owner ref. So the CRDs were getting cleaned up through garbage collection. And when you delete a CRD, all of the corresponding custom resources, so instances of that CRD, are deleted as well. So what was happening was you might provision a database or something like that, then its CRD type would get cleaned up by garbage collection, leading to the delete of your database, and then for that to be deleted externally and that sort of thing. So we absolutely did not want that to happen. So the intermediate fix was to clean up by label. So basically, instead of owner references, since we only want these cleaned up when they're deleted by means of the stack manager reconciliation loop, we can do that by label. So instead of setting owner references, which lead to the garbage collection, we just look for these labels on the actual CRDs, and you can see what they look like here. And then we clean those up manually with the stack manager. So this was implemented, and we got out the 0.5.1 release. So the people who did work on this were Nick, Jared, and Marcus here. So special thanks to them. I don't think any of them are on the call, but really appreciate y'all working through that. And that was definitely a big benefit for the project. So thank you for that. And this problem should be alleviated now. Another thing to keep in mind is a pull request we mentioned earlier could potentially impact this. So cluster scoped cluster stack install. So as we mentioned before, this issue was happening because we had a namespaced cluster stack install with owner references on a cluster scoped CRD. And so I'm not exactly sure how this looks in relation to the labels, if we want to continue cleaning up with labels or not, because they're both cluster scope now. I think we could potentially use the owner references again. Don't take me verbatim on that. I would want to check with Marcus or Nick on that. But so anyway, that's how we're doing it for now. It works well. It doesn't change the experience from a user perspective at all. And you're not going to see random deletion of resources. So it was really nice to get that fixed. All right, last thing here is our optional time for technical discussion. Is there anyone on the call who wanted to talk about anything in particular?
If no one else has a topic, I have a non-technical topic. It's actually a follow-up to what we were just talking about with Muvafik, Bassam, and I. So I guess it's kind of a question for Bassam. I believe part of the original motivation for doing the separate effort was that we thought that by doing a subset of the functionality for resource packs, we might be able to get it out sooner while the fuller template stack stuff was being worked on. So I don't think that Vavik or I made that decision directly, but we can make this decision. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the full details of this, but it does seem that there's, you could also talk about it from a different perspective and say, okay, can we get an early version of template stacks
Right.
out and running? You can make the argument on both sides. So,
Right.
and if what we are doing is writing a controller that can plug in variants into a customized, set of files, that feels like a building block that might be the first template controller, and
Right.
might be used in the context of resource packs, right? So,
Yeah. I guess so.
Or in the context of these complex resource types, or in the context of the resource catalog, or all those discussions would converge potentially if we had a building block.
Right.
So,
Yeah, totally. So my question would be then, I think that Mavafik and I we probably know enough to be able to evaluate the situation and make a call one way or another. Should we go ahead and do that?
Actually, I think like if we would have a chance like to sync, because like I think there is some overlap, but there is also like like template stacks. I don't know how much like it exposes to users, so we might want to have like one or two different options for the developers that they can just choose, and their level of like either full YAML or like with some Go code, or like some opinionated version of template stack controller maybe.
yeah. Right.
So we can have like a high level chat about this one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this probably needs a bit more fleshing out, in my opinion, in terms of direction. And it's fine to say that we are making a smaller opinionated version here to kind of unblock some scenarios. That's fine too. So.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to my pattern matcher detected a pattern here, so I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Well, then Mavafik and I will sync, and then we'll send out an update about what we're thinking.
Cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Daniel, and making sure we didn't leave this meeting without addressing that. Does anyone else have any discussion topics they wanted to touch on? Otherwise, we can get 15 minutes back to our Tuesday. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Have a great week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for driving this, guys.
Sure thing.
Bye.